Welcome, everybody. My name is Ben Fairfield. If I don't know you, I'm the Managing Director of Coaching at Success and Success Magazine. And we are starting a new series called Expert Interviews. And this is where I get to interview some incredible talent across the country in personal development, goal achievement, entrepreneurship, you name it. These people have accomplished big things. And I'm really excited, incredibly excited to have our first guest be Mr. Kyle Wilson. Now, Kyle, I know you. We know a lot of the same people. We run in some of the same circles, but I know some people may not know your background because for a lot of years you were behind the scenes of massive empires. Tell us really quickly, if you would, your story.
Yeah, so thanks, Ben. And by the way, number one, wow, okay, very cool. Kicking this thing off. It's good to see everyone. Good to see you, Ben. And our mutual friend, Don Hobbs, made the introduction, and I go way back with Don. But, you know, I'll actually tell the story if that's okay, because that'll fill in the gaps. But I grew up in a small town, never went to college, got in a lot of trouble, changed my life at age 19, but I was not the guy you would think that would later partner with Jim Rohn. Ended up moving out of my small town, Vernon, Texas, to Dallas in age 26, 27. And very serendipitously, a year later, got in the seminar business, which was totally crazy for me because the thought of getting up and speaking terrified me. And the early days of learning the seminar business, you're making 100 cold calls a day to book yourself to go speak at 2 to 3 meetings a day. And I'm talking car dealerships, real estate companies, insurance companies. And you being in the insurance background, you know that you have a lot of speakers and they're not necessarily giving the speakers a lot of attention. So I had to learn to book myself to speak and then go out there and do it. And then second of all, give a presentation. That led me to becoming really good, filling up huge rooms, traveling around the country. And I would hire Jim Rohn and hire Brian Tracy and hire Og Mandino to speak at my events. And I did that for 3 years. And then one day, Jim Rohn told me that him and his business partner had split, and that, you know, I said, wow, Jim, I think you're the best speaker in the world. I'm a pretty good promoter. I know you're not looking for partnerships per se, because those haven't worked out too well. How about you give me an exclusive on all your speaking, on creating products, and I'll just pay you off the top. So you don't have to worry about if the company makes money. Because he tells the story back during the Tony Robbins days, Adventures in Achievement. After it was 800,000 in the hole, they shut it down. And in this particular scenario, I think his partner owed him 400,000. And so that he wasn't looking for a partner. So I asked for exclusivity, but I would pick up the tab. I'd pay for everything. I'd pay him off the top. And that was 1993. And I created that first year, Ben, I took him from 20 speaking dates to 110. I tripled his speaking fee, started creating products. One in particular we'll talk about later that was a viral marketing tool. And it was very intentional because I know we're going to talk about strategy, but it was designed to knock down all the dominoes. And that sold 6 million copies and the race was on. And one thing I discovered was Jim Rohn was the gateway drug to personal development. You know, a doctor or a dentist would join Amway, hear Jim speak, quit Amway later for whatever reason, but they had gotten hooked into personal development. So Jim wasn't that ambitious to speak a lot. He wasn't that ambitious to create products. I would create a new product every 18 months. So I started another company called Your Success Store. And that's when I started taking Brian Tracy and Mark Victor Hansen and Les Brown and Dennis Waitley into the same companies that I was taking Jim into. I started selling their products, started co-creating their products. So, you know, my early days, seminar promoter, then an agent for Jim and Dennis Waitley and others, then a publisher, sold millions of books, publishing books, learning how to leverage books. And then in 2000, the internet, 1999, I guess I started my first newsletter, online newsletter. Eventually had 8 of them, messages from the masters, quotes from the masters, Slide Edge newsletter, Jim Rohn newsletter, and built a 1 million+ list. And eventually sold my companies in 2007, late 2007, to the guy who was buying Success Magazine at the time. And I was also coaching Darren Hardy. So I had brought Darren into the Success and Training Network. So Darren ushered over to become the publisher, and I worked with him for 3 years, helping that transition. But I retired for 7 years, and now I'm back in the game, loving every minute of it. So that was a long-winded overview of a little bit of my story.
Oh, I love that. But I think that's appropriate for context, because I think the names that you just said, and I know there's some you haven't mentioned too, but the names that you just mentioned that you've worked with, that you've had the privilege of not only working with, but getting to know, and really truly doing life in some cases with some of these people, it's mind blowing, because these are some pillars of the personal development space. So I would love to kind of hear. I'm sure there's tons of things you could share around your time with each of these individuals, but are there any key lessons that you learned from time with any of those people that stand out, that maybe you still lean on or go back to or reflect on today as you're going through the day to day?
Oh, 100%. I would say this foundation of all the lessons I've learned from the people I've worked with, as well as the books I've read, and all the experiences we have. That's the foundation of everything I do. First of all, I'll say this. People say, wow, you must have been a great networker to go work with all these amazing people. And it's not that at all. It has nothing to do with networking. From my vantage point, and this was one of the big lessons I learned from Jim Rohn early on. He said, if you want to become successful, learn to bring value to the marketplace. He said, if you want to become wealthy, become valuable to valuable people. And so I think, Ben, the first principle of how do you go work with these amazing people, it's the very thing you're doing now, is you create platforms to bring value to the marketplace. So being a seminar promoter, if I had the ability to get 2,000 people in the room, I didn't have to call Les Brown. He called me. I didn't have to go meet Mark Victor Hansen. He came to me. Robin Sharma sending me the early manuscripts for, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari.
Wow.
And then that transitioned into building the first million-plus email list. If you took all the different lists I had combined. So again, everyone wants you to sell the product. So it's a brilliant shortcut. It's not easy to do, but a lot of people think the magic's networking. I think the magic is how can you bring value. So if you build a big podcast, you'll attract amazing people. If you can create a platform to sell other people's products or put them on stage, you have now got the secret formula to attract amazing people. And then that's just the start. I always tell people, I have no desire to just go meet someone for a photo op. If you're going to meet someone, hopefully you got the goods to be able to deliver so you can actually build a long-term relationship. But that lesson from Jim, that's one of the big ones. I could go on, just lessons from Jim Rohn. I'll give you a couple more, and then we can go into Brian and Les and some others. But this is fundamental Jim Rohn when he said, "You're the major key to your better future is you." But it's cliche-ish, but I got it. At age 27, I got it. Because I was a little bit into politics, and I was watching the economy, and I was a little bit unnerved by what was going on by all these different things. And once Jim said, no, that happens to everyone. Everyone's impacted the same by the weather, by the economy, by who makes the laws. Everyone at the big companies impacted by the same rules. That's a given. Now, what the major determining factor is what you're going to do with it. The difference between reading a book a week or a month versus watching the comedy channel at the end of a year, what's going to matter? All the major things in our life get down to things we control, beginning with our attitude, beginning with our thoughts, beginning with our activities, beginning with the decisions of how we're going to invest to learn in ourselves. And so I got it. Something really clicked with me. And so those two things were the two biggest lessons, is that if I got to control the narrative, I could go become a student, I could learn the game. And also if I brought value, good things will happen. Jim and I, when I made him this offer in 1993 to have an exclusive, we did a handshake. And that handshake lasted for 10 years until finally I said, I got to ink this up, because I was worried if something happened to me, who was going to run the company, because it was my company. But here's the beauty of a handshake for 10 years. It's built totally on this one thing, bringing value. Jim brought value, I brought value. And because we both brought value, it worked. not because we had an agreement, it's because we both brought value. And so that's a principle, as a marketer, I say marketing's made up of tactics and principles. And tactics obviously are, they change with technology and they're constantly moving and everyone's chasing tactics. But there's about a dozen principles that apply today, that applied 10 years ago, that applied 30 years ago, that applied 50 years ago. And that is one of the principles, is everything you do, if you can focus on bringing value, it's going to not only do well, but it's going to compound, and you're going to have referrals and people are going to become your advocates. And so that's been a big part of the philosophy I've had. And the other thing, as long as we're on Jim lessons, he taught me success is predictable. And so now it just becomes about faith. If you really, it's simple, you go plant a seed in the ground of tomatoes, and I don't know the number, is it 60 days, whatever it is, in 60 days, you're going to have tomatoes. Now you got to plant the right seed at the right place at the right time, take good care of it, make sure, something doesn't, the weeds or insects don't overtake it. If the human baby, I think, is 240 days, and there are no rushing these things. And so, but if you do all the right things, the odds are in your favor, you're going to get a result. And again, that's why I'm more of a farmer than I am a hunter. A lot of people are out hunting, which tends to kind of churn through people, versus farming, which means you go sow, cultivate, and then have a harvest. And the cool thing about the harvest is it has a compounding effect over time. So that was a huge one.
I love that. Now, a couple of things, if I want to jump in here and kind of get some more of your thoughts on these things. You said value. And I can remember back when I was first getting into sales, young and dumb, and I was first getting into it, and I read the book, The Go-Giver, right? Not that it has anything to do with any of the people we're talking about. However, that's really in my mind where it was solidified with me that, okay, this concept of delivering value, providing value, giving it away with the intent and the heart of wanting to help other people will attract everything that I ever could possibly want or need. Like, that's how this equation works. So I love what you're saying there. I think it's spot on. I've lived it personally and continue to try to live every day that way. I want to get your thoughts for somebody watching, and they say, you know what, that sounds like a great concept. Yeah, that's one of those quotes I'll write down and I smile and nod as it makes sense as I'm writing it. How do you practically apply it in today's world, regardless of what somebody's selling potentially, right? Because sales is sales at the root of it. But how do you identify the value needed? Like, how did you come to these giants in industry and identify what could I provide them that would be perceived as incredible value? Because that would be intimidating for a lot of people.
Well, first of all, Bob Berg was my most recent podcast guest. He's a good friend. We go back to 1997. He's in my upcoming book. And I love how he talks about suspending our own self-interest when you're talking to a client. There's so much gold. Bob's just an amazing human being. And I would say that you had asked earlier about, are there some common lessons? I would say for the people I've worked with, and this is one of my tenets, one of my principles, they have to be good people. Zig Ziglar said, never do a good deal with a bad guy. So, Bob fits into that good guy, just like Jim, just like Dennis Waitley. And so you want to get around people that are philosophically aligned with who you are and what you do. And there's a lot of people I gladly walk away from. No judgment. We're not philosophically aligned about this hunting versus farming. To the value question, I think, first of all, you don't focus on what they're going to need. That's not where the equation begins. The equation begins with who are you? What are you put on this earth to do? What are your strengths? What's your secret sauce? What do you want to pursue? You can't be all things to all people. I always say, and this is 99% true, if you start looking at the people on my podcast and people that part of my inner circle, Phil Collin of Def Leppard, obviously Brian Tracy, Les Brown, all these, I don't go after them. They come to me because I'm attracting, based on what I'm offering. And so the key is you got to build around what makes you special, what your secret sauce is, really find out what your passion is, what you're about, and then be okay with all the people that it's just not going to work for. I can be a huge Neil Young fan, but he's not going to show up at my inner circle masterminds. But Phil Collin of Def Leppard has. I have had amazing people because they're in alignment with what I'm about. And so I think that's number one, is find out your authentic. That's one of the problems I have with copycat stuff. And there is no cookie cutter to any of this. It's a self-discovery process. And the more clear you are about what you want to do, what you're about, then that opens up a door of who you can then serve. And along the way, as you do it, you have to go build it. I didn't start out with these big names, right? I had to start out with 100-person events. We left that part of the story out, but I started off modestly. And after about 3 years, I went out on my own and I was filling up big rooms. So I think it's really that. It's not, and again, there's a lot of people that teach the opposite, right? They say, go find that person, go build a product around it. That's not how I look at compounding things that will be around 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now. Because I always say the worst thing that could happen is you build the wrong thing and it works really well. And, and that happens. People, they're short-sighted to go get a result. Like one of my principles, I mentioned, and again, there's exceptions, but one of my principles is I don't do one-offs, So if someone has a great idea, now trust me, I've done enough in the past, been doing this a long time, 25 years. I've learned the hard lesson, no matter how sexy it is, if it's not part of my core business. In 1993, I created this thing called the wheel. I drew a circle on a sheet of paper. I just got this exclusive with Jim Rohn, and I drew a circle on a sheet of paper. I put in the center a hub, and I put Jim Rohn, and each spoke on the wheel was a product or service that currently existed. And then I said, okay, number one, how do I get more people on the wheel? That's the big equation, build an audience. Then number two, over time, let them pick the spokes they want. So it's not a funnel, there's no agenda. It's just build relationships, and over time, people pick what they want. You got to give them reasons to raise their hand.
Sure.
There's a lot of sophistication to the wheel. And if you look at Darren Hardy and Robin Sharma and people I've coached, Robert Helms of the real estate guys, they all follow the will mentality. And, there's 5 key things to every spoke. And one of them is it part of your core business? So you got to figure out what I am circling back around here. Is it part of your core business? So before you try and bring value out there, figure out what you're about, what your core business is, and then you'll attract people along the way. And as long as I'm talking spokes, I'll say one more thing.
Yeah.
And this is massive. Will it knock down the dominoes? I know Gary Keller wrote the book, The One Thing, and he talks about that. Well, I would say in 1993, I was living that principle, because I'd go into a city, not know one person, and in 90 days, I got to have 2,000 people in a room. And there are tactically 50 things you could do. I mean, you can look at classified ads in the newspaper and call them. And I had my 50 tactical things lined up. But for the most part, there's about half a dozen things. And in particular, there's 2 or 3 things that are going to contribute to filling that room up. And so, what one thing's going to knock down the most dominoes and take you to where you need to go? And so again, celebrities can be a distraction. People bring me an athlete or bring me an entertainer, and I have Grammy winners, I have Emmy winners, I have athletes, but they have to fit a criteria that they really want what I have. If someone says, hey, Kyle, you should go meet so-and-so, I have zero interest, Ben. My only interest is if they want to meet me because I'm the guy that built Jim Rohn International or the things I'm offering. And so I always say, well, see if they're, send them to this page or this page, look at the Darren Hardy testimonial or the Les Brown or Mark Victor Hansen. If they're interested, awesome. I'd love to do a call with them, but I'm not here to sell someone. And so it's building something that can create attraction marketing to create the people you want.
Man, that's powerful stuff. I'm hoping people are writing this down. Yes, we're recording it so you can rewatch this, because you should. And something else you said there that I just wrote down in my journal. you're talking about, and it made me think of the saying of saying yes to some great things requires saying no to a lot of good things, right? So you're saying I have to get real clear with what those great things are that I need to say yes to, and also have clarity around what I need to say no to. Not because necessarily they're bad things, they just may not be in alignment with where you're going, who you are and what you're offering.
Yeah, I had Darren Hardy on my podcast. It's the only podcast he said yes to in 4 years. And, you know, I was able to coach Darren for 3 years. And Darren had a phenomenal quote. This is worth writing down if someone's taking notes. He said, "One hard no makes up for 1,000 other no's." And so for him, like one of his hard no's, he doesn't give testimonials. I got the only one I know of that he gave me in 2013. Then he did another one when I was with him last. But he doesn't do book forwards. There's just certain things, and he coaches like the founder of Remax. So he's like, if I did book forwards, I would get 100 requests just from people that are in my tribe. Sure. And he's like, so I have a hard no, I don't do book requests. And I have my hard no's, you know, and so there's some hard no's. If you're clear on a hard no, one of my hard no's is I don't do one-offs. I just don't do them. Now there are exceptions. It's like Darren made an exception by, you know, I was the one exception to do a podcast with. Sure. You have them, but it really makes it crystal clear when you know the 3 or 4 things you're about and you're totally content. I can tell you safely, Jim Rohn had been around the mountain enough. You couldn't create any fear or loss for him. There was like 0 chance I could share, and I, you know, I was ambitious. You know, I was this type A guy, and I was bringing deals all the time. He's like, you know, not really. That's not what I want to do. And he did. He literally turned down 95% of the stuff I brought. Now I did a couple of things without telling him, and the 2 of them were the biggest things we ever did. One was the quote book. Another was a product called Building Your Network Marketing Business. They each took over a year, and he would have vetoed if I would have said, if I would even run it by him. So I just did it. And, but you know, for the most part, and it all worked out. It was great, you know, and that's the thing. You have to, he was working out of what he was great at. I was working out of what I was great at. And then you find where those 2 intersect.
Sure. Okay. Well, one more thought I wanted to go to before, and I want to hear more lessons because that's what everyone's here to hear. Okay. But I want to get your take. I'm going to be selfish here because I'm the one on the video with you, but discipline, right? So this has come up a lot in our coaching calls recently. It came up in a big group that actually Don Hobbs and I were speaking in front of recently, a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about discipline, and the idea of discipline is oftentimes has a negative connotation, right? We think of when we're kids, we're disciplined, we do something incorrectly. So we have this negative connotation to it. However, Jim Rohn had a lot to say about discipline, right? Being the gap between goal setting and achievement. I'm paraphrasing, but he had a lot to say about this. And I know discipline played a huge part in his life, and it does in the part of any goal achievers. How has discipline showed up in your career, right? Because like you said, a lot of people assume we just arrive, right? We don't understand that success is a process, not an event. So there was a lot of trials and steps and things that, of course, we don't have time to go through all of them in this time, but you did a lot of work in those years leading up to where you sit in that chair today. Discipline had to play a part in that. So can you expand a little bit there around how it's played a part in your world and your thoughts on discipline in general?
For sure. You know, the word for me was activity, you know, which is similar to discipline. So, you know, to go fill up seminar rooms, you had to put in a lot of activity, and it was a numbers game, and it was just a pure assault. You know, you go into a market and you have a deadline. I always said when I sold my companies and retired, they're like, "What'd you do next?" I said, "I literally retired. I became a Mr. Mom," because I'd run so many 440s in a row, you know, by going into a city. It's all out assault. And, you know, Ben, anyone you hear that's been successful, and I'm talking music, Hollywood, obviously entrepreneurs, they all have the same thing at the end of the day. There might be one exception out of 100. They say, yeah, I outworked everyone. You know, I wasn't the smartest. I wasn't the most gifted. I wasn't the most talented. I just outworked everyone. And I'm a big believer in family and balance, and you got to just negotiate all those things. But typically, I didn't see a lot of movies when I didn't know what the Comedy Channel was. You know, I didn't read fiction books. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying I had a goal, and that goal, I will share a lesson. You asked for lessons earlier. This is from Brian Tracy. It was 1993. I'd promoted Brian for 2 or 3 years. I'd been doing Jim Rohn, Brian Tracy, and Og Mandino. And then I got this exclusive with Jim in the middle of 1993. But I was at Brian's house, and I was going to do these Jim Rohn, Brian Tracy events around the country. And Brian said, you know, Kyle, you're a young guy. You don't have kids yet. He said, I got something I want to share with you. He said, success is like getting an airplane off the ground. And the thing is, you know, you're going down the runway, you know, the plane's full of fuel, it's full of people, it's a big old plane. It starts at 0. So breaking gravity is all this effort, and you're going down, you got it 10 miles an hour, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. And the amount of fuel and energy it takes to go from, you know, stopped, full of fuel is enormous. He said, now, once you get the plane off the ground and you're going 300 miles an hour, it actually takes less fuel to go 300 miles an hour up in the, you know, the higher in the stratosphere. And so he said, I encourage you to take a couple of years and pay the price to get the plane off the ground. Because he said, sadly, the majority of people never get the plane off the ground. They spend their whole life going 50, 60, 70, 80, 20, you know, 10 miles an hour, but they never have liftoff. And he said, your goal is to get 30,000 feet in the air. And that's going to take some focus. It's going to take some effort. It's like training for the Olympics, you know, you're going to have to pay a price, but I encourage you to pay the price. And then you'll be the beneficiary the rest of your life. Well, that was 30 years ago. And I have Brian to thank for that. He was recently on one of my inner circle calls, and I, you know, got to thank him one more time for that intentional advice he gave me. Out of all the things he could have told me, that was his encouragement. So I think it's similar. I think there's two different things, Ben. There's discipline as in habits, as in daily routines. The thing I'm referring to more is, because you asked me how I built what I built, it was activity, and it was a numbers game, and it was an all-out assault. There's some similarities there, but they're a little bit different. So, you know, I think of Stephen Pressfield, who I'm a big fan of. He's an incredible author and screenplay writer. And, you know, he wrote The War of Art and Do the Work. And he talks about, you know, we get trapped, and I can relate to this. We get trapped into, we're an artist, or we're not a morning person, we're a night person. And he's like, but, you know, the truth is, you just got to block out the time. And when you block out the time, the muse shows up, you know, miracles start to happen. So I think of that more in terms of the discipline that you're talking about.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. Well, one other person you mentioned there was Les Brown. And man, I have the privilege of having been certified with John Maxwell. On one of the more recent events, he had Les Brown actually come, and he was a surprise guest. Nobody knew he was coming, right? And here I am, I don't know, 15 feet off the stage, and this man that I've read and watched for a number of years is sitting on stage right in front of me. And I know it wasn't a new quote, but the combination of the quote, the impact of it, and the fact he's sitting right in front of me imprinted in me. And it was his famous quote of, "It's hard to see the picture when you're inside the frame." Right? And so he's talking about perspective. So I want to use that as a segue, because I know you've worked with Les. So that quote in mind, that perspective, if you could go back and tell 27-year-old Kyle what to do different, or give him some advice, what would you tell yourself being on this side of that, looking back now that you're outside of that frame?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Let me first just speak to Les. I remember 1993, Les pulled up to my office, said, "Hey, whatever you're doing with Jim Rohn, who's one of my mentors, I want you to do with me." And I remember that night going to dinner with him and Gladys Knight, who was married to Gladys Knight at the time. and they're still good friends. I talked to, Les, we're a day apart on our birthdays. And he called me February 17th on his birthday. Mine's February 16th, this, last month. And he turned 75 and I turned 60. So what an honor. And he's in this, everyone we've mentioned's in the Success Habits book because they were on the podcast. And I think of Les Brown, us doing music and motivation events and having Billy Preston, the Billy Preston, You Are So Beautiful, Nothing from Nothing, the Fifth Beatle, there playing on his organ, doing these motivation and music events. So Les has been a dear friend and someone I'm so inspired by everything he teaches. I'm not a big go back and tell myself guy. I mean, I've tried that. There's lessons I can learn, but I think today, I can do the same introspection today. So there's a lot of things I did right, and there's some things I might not have done right, but if I would have done some things differently, who knows, and so that's not really how I roll. I just say today, whether you're 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or 70, ask yourself the questions of what I need to do today and who can I learn from? And who you spend time with matters. Oh my God, that's the biggest influence of my life, Ben, is who I spend time with. I created a Inner Circle Mastermind for me, and I invited all the people I wanted to learn from to be part of it. And that was 5 years ago. I still do it for me. That like the best decisions I make, whether it's tax benefits or financial or health or relationships or business, comes from other people I'm around, because it's hard to learn in a vacuum. And so people go, and I'm a big fan of reading books and getting educated, but you got to put it into action. And when you're in the game, that's why you want mentors, like you're in the real estate world, right? Or that's part of your background. And so you can teach, or you can have someone say, hey, Ben, I got this deal and this is happening. That's where the real learning happens. And so I know influences are so powerful on our discipline, on the questions you would ask your 27-year-old self that I'm saying you should ask yourself today. Sure. Having people around you that inspire you, that's huge.
All right. I love it. So speaking of today, here you are, you retired once and now, like most achievers, that didn't stick. And so now you get the privilege of doing what you love. You get more choice over what you do. So if you would, let's take a couple minutes and tell everyone listening and watching, what is it that you're doing if they want to connect with you? Because I know you have lots to share. What are you working on right now?
Well, in 2015, I started the Kyle Wilson Inner Circle Mastermind, and it's not one of those come learn from Kyle. It's really an amazing community of entrepreneurs, real estate investors, doctors, Tim Cole, 31-year Colonel in the Marines. It's just an amazing eclectic group, and I am a promoter at heart, so I'm shining the spotlight on all of them. I do teach a little bit of marketing. So that's the thing I probably enjoy the most. Also do books. If it's okay, I'll mention this book real quick. Yeah, this was the most recent, Success Habits of Super Achievers. And it's kind of a who's who that are in it. Darren Hardy, Dennis Waitley, Les Brown, Phil Collin of Def Leppard, Mark Victor Hansen, Todd Stoudemire, Grammy winners, Emmy winners. And they're all people that were part of my Success Habits podcast. And they're all people I go back with, for the most part, 20 plus years. And so they were long form interviews, 2-hour interviews, with the premise of, if you could sit down with Jim Rohn, like if someone said Jim Rohn, and you're not going to hear the seminar that you can get on YouTube or on the audios, this is the question behind the question. I like to ask questions where they have to look up and go, they have to think about it, because that's when wisdom comes out. And you're good at that, Ben, asking the off script type question. And that's when you tap into their wisdom. So if I'm at Darren, this happened just, last year. I was at Darren Hardy's house, and then Dennis Waitley's house, and Brian Tracy's house, and John Assaraf's house, all within 24 hours. if they're going to go 2 hours, I'm going to go 2 hours, right? I'm not going to say how I got a 20-minute podcast. And so we really tap into that. And from that, I said, hey, listen, I got this book. Would love to tell your story in it. Tom Ziegler, multiple others are in the book, Lisa Haisha. And so I would love to give that book away free if anyone wants it, the digital copy. And all they have to do is send an email to info@kylewilson.com and say Ben, or say send book. And I'll send you the book. I'll also send you several other digital books I have, plus the 2-hour interview with Darren Hardy and other interviews. So the books I really love doing, and I've done a lot of them. Passionistas. Oh, that book's not sitting up. This was 40 Millennial Women that I recently published. And we have amazing entrepreneurs that are part of the books. And, I have a project I recently did called The Wheel, and it's a 16 module, 80 video, over the top kind of just breakdown of everything I think of strategically that it takes to be successful as a marketer, whether you're an entrepreneur, speaker, author. And so that was a lot of work, and I'm still wrapping that up. I launched it, but I said, hey, this is going to be delivered over 3 months. And so we're wrapping that up, and that's been a lot of fun. And just like you, I'm a busy guy. I think the podcast takes a lot of time, and talking to my audience. I'm a big believer in build an audience and talk to it. So, just trying to come up with value I can deliver the marketplace.
I love that. All right, so connect with Kyle. I wanted to go there for a second.
Thank you so much.
Questions if you've got more time.
I do.
Because I'm not letting you go early either. So here's my next question. Now, this is going to require you to look back a bit, but not necessarily at yourself. But what we know is we went through a tough year in 2020, right? COVID wreaked havoc. And unfortunately, and I don't know if you saw this, but in some of the folks that I get the opportunity to speak into their life, initially I saw the human response, which was analysis paralysis, and just to kind of be frozen in fear and the unknown, not knowing what to expect. And so for those that I got to work with, I encouraged them, pushed them, sometimes kicked them to get them into action, like you said, right? Because that's what was going to get us through. We can't control a lot of this other stuff. However, I'm seeing right now a big need, a big desire, a big hunger for personal development, for learning, for books like you're putting out here. What do you say to those that maybe felt like they lost some ground in 2020? Where should they start now? Because this is what it is, right? I don't like the phrase new normal, but it is what it is. This world is not the same as it was before COVID showed up. So if people feel like they lost some ground in 2020, what would Kyle Wilson, if they were in a one-on-one coaching relationship with you, what would he say to those people in terms of getting back up on that horse and charging hard into this year?
Great question. I would begin with a couple of things just to lay the groundwork. One is when COVID happened, we were doing live events. I had my Inner Circle Mastermind, which meets Los Angeles, Dallas, and Philly. And then I had a big memory and marketing event lined up with Rohn. And it was all live events. And, we would maybe do a monthly phone call with a special guest speaker. And all that, now we have COVID. What are you going to do? And who knew where it was going to go? I was one of those that thought, it's not going to be that big a deal. But, the minute everything started closing, we went to Tuesday night calls, and we started doing live calls, and we started bringing in experts. And that was huge, like having the ability to tap into doctors and people that have, ran FEMA before, and just really, ear to the ground of what's going on. And Tom Ziegler said something that was so powerful. He said, the quicker people can accept things aren't going back the way they are, the faster they can step into what's in front of them. And so I think, fortunately, we didn't sit there, I didn't sit there and hope things would go back and say, well, I'll see what happens before I jump into a Tuesday night live call. That Tuesday night live call has been the best thing we've done. And then I switched a live event in April to virtual. That turned out to be the best thing we could have done. So the quicker you can get over being a victim and just say that it is what it is. I love that you said it is what it is. The quicker you can accept that and step into what you have, then you find yourself in two unique situations. And we can relate, everyone can relate to these two. One situation is you're a little bit ahead of the curve. I mean, you're on top of it. And those people that were on top of it, I think of my friend Darren Hardy, I think of Tom at Ziegler. I feel like we did this as well. They moved fast and they turned it to an advantage. I remember interviewing Les Brown for my inner circle in May, and then again in September. In May, he was like the rest of us. In September, he looked 20 years younger. He's like, Kyle, I might not ever go out on stage until 2027. I'm loving this virtual thing. And he has turned that into, I interviewed Roger Love. If people don't know Roger, Google him. He's the guy. And Roger's like, Kyle, this has given me a new lease with my family. I get to quit at 4 o'clock every day. I mean, Roger coaches the biggest singers in the world, the biggest entertainers. Tony Robbins, he's a voice coach, and he is incredible. And he's like, I used to have to jump on airplanes. Someone's, M&M's loses his voice and I have to fly to St. Louis, right? He's like, now I get to have these amazing rituals with my family. I get to quit at 4 o'clock. So those that were on top of the game stayed on top of the game. Those that were behind, that's where you got to see where the puck's going. You almost got to say, I think the mistake I saw some people do, and I really encourage the people in my world to be thoughtful about this, is because marketers show up, right? And they're all saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. And people are coming from this fear of loss and, okay, I got to go jump into something. And oftentimes it's a little too late. I mean, there are a lot of people out there, running Facebook ads. There are a lot of people knocking at your door, to get your attention. And so instead of trying to catch up where the puck is today, my encouragement was look out 3 months from now, because the people that are today going down their path, you can actually put all your effort into where the puck's going to be 3 months from now and actually be ahead of the game. And I watched that happen too. I watched people be a little bit more strategic and not say, I got to catch up today. I'm going to see where I want to go. Just like we started this with, what am I about? It was a great time to reboot. And why I said everyone can relate to those two. Someone might be behind on business, but they're ahead in health, or they're ahead in relationships. Some people might have been ahead in business, but their relationships were at a deficit, right? Or their health was. So I think everyone's got something that they're doing well at. And then we all have things that we're behind on. And so we all get to do those two things, like really accelerate the good and reboot on the things we need to change and look out into the future and have that vision and that plan.
I love that. I love that. And I took 72 airplane rides the year before COVID, right? So I was living that life. You get to know the flight crews by first name. So I agree. I lived that, and it was an incredible gift. It was an incredible gift. It goes back to something I've shared with people. It was shared with me a long time ago, that there's opportunity in everything, and it's found by those who are looking for it. Yes. Right. And so for me, I think that a lot of it is mindset. And when stuff shows up, when life happens, doesn't matter what it is, but when life happens, those who benefit from those gifts and learn and grow through those difficult times are the ones who are seeking out the lessons, seeking out that positive gift inside of what otherwise is a pretty crappy deal, right? And that's just the difference in two people's way of approaching things. So I love
and I got to tell you, my observation was, and this is for myself as well, sure, it's who's your tribe? Like, who are you hanging out with? If you're hanging out with people that felt, pretty beat down and they didn't have answers and they weren't seeking, that was one type of mindset that you could get surrounded with. But if you found yourself, around other people that were, searching and they were on top of things, and it just, that again, it's cliche-ish, but when Jim Rohn says the 5 people you spend time with, that's the biggest determining factor. And I just got to say that's huge. And so, like, whether it's your work environment or your church environment or you're part of organizations, and I know the intention I have of who I'm going to spend time with, really, that was 90% of all the information I was getting, to have access to really smart people that have vetted things out. So I don't have to watch the news every day. I don't have to vet through what the media tells me. I actually got people I trust that are vetting out the PPP loans, or vetting out what's the latest on COVID, or vetting out how to handle the tax situation, or vetting out what's going on with Zoom and the internet and all those good things. So you just want to get around smart people that you trust.
Yeah, yeah, and who you vetted, right? That takes time to build that circle, and I'm sure you could speak for hours on that too. But that's also, if somebody doesn't have that trusted group around them, that's not something that necessarily happens quickly if it's done correctly. You need to vet these people to make sure that they're the right ones.
I think you can step into those. Like you guys have groups. I have my inner circle. So there are groups you can step into, and it's always. I interviewed a guy named Rock Thomas recently, and Rock said the greatest success he has is getting into groups, people smarter than he is. Ray Higdon and Jessica Higdon, I think they spent $100,000 to be part of Grant Cardone's group or whatever. And they're like, that's the best investment we ever made. So I think it's a reoccurring theme for me, and I'm not trying to sell my stuff. I'm trying to say that is a truth, right? I know you said, what would I tell my 27-year-old self? I was a bit of a lone thinker. I did have a couple of people around me. And I think one of the things, even though I had a lot of success doing what I did, this thing about a mastermind I was missing. So I wasn't able to have the well-rounded success I would have liked. How could I have done that? Read more books, maybe, but it's actually, I was missing some influence in my life of other people that were achieving, but they were also had health, and they were achieving, but they also had lifestyle. And so I was that lone wolf mentality is probably the biggest mistake I made if I look back.
I got you to say what you'd tell your 27-year-old self. No, but I think that's such a powerful lesson, right? And I still battled that. I think that's human condition, right? But again, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill's Mastermind, that whole section, I didn't get it at first, and I didn't get it the second time, and I didn't get it the third time, but it was probably on time 20 where it started sinking in, like, okay, I can go further faster with people rather than just on my own. So
it's also an energy thing. It's like, if you've ever played team sports, if like, I remember I didn't play football much. I played tennis, but in 7th grade, you're running these, 30-yard wind sprints. And after about the 7th one with pads on, or the 3rd one, the only reason you're running is the people beside you are running it, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a synergy that happens as well. It's not just accountability, it's synergy, right? Because a lot of us don't want to be told what to do, but when you get around other people that inspire you, it just kind of raises the level. It's no different. I don't know if you have this experience. This is one of my kind of the entrepreneurial part of me. If I start listening to a podcast or start reading a book, if I'm inspired by it, within a minute or two, it's got me triggered with ideas, and I almost have to set it aside and run with it. And that's part of what getting around other people that are doing inspiring things. And again, it's not just business. It could be family. It could be philanthropic. It could be health. It could be investing. It could be all these different things.
I love that. Well, Kyle, we're nearly through an hour that went by like that. So I appreciate everything you've shared. I wanted to give you an opportunity, last couple minutes here. We've talked about a lot. We've covered a lot of topics, and there's been some incredible nuggets of gold in this. How would you wrap this up? What would you say in closing to those watching, listening? How do you leave them based on what we've shared with them so far?
I think, everything gets down to interest. And so I was recently asked on a podcast, Kyle, what would you tell someone that's not motivated? I would say, I don't have a lot to tell them, right? That's not my job. Our job is to find something that inspires us. And I said before we started, this thing called opportunity precedes personal development. And once you're inspired by something, And I think it was Tony that said we get inspired either through inspiration or desperation. For me, it was more desperation. But, if you're at a place that you're feeling a little desperate, or you're at a place that you're inspired to want to make a difference for all the right reasons, then personal development, step into learning, step into opportunities to, there's so much available, podcast, your group that you're doing, books, there's just so much available. And then you got to take action, right? And, strategic action, meaning get clear on what you want, get clear on what it is that's important to you, and just get started. And the big thing is you can't see 3 years down the road. I didn't know who Jim Rohn was when I got in the seminar business. So to me, the plan is get inspired to do something if you're just starting that will, let's say you're new at real estate. What do I do the next 30 days? What do I do the next 90 days? That will then lead you to, now do I build my team? Now, how do I advertise? You don't have to know all that in the beginning. You just got to get started. So, raise the level of who you play with, raise the level of input, and have your reasons. Jim Rohn talked about reasons are everything. Your why is more important than the how. And people read your music too. So, show up with the right music. And that's by, watching things like this and, Success Magazine and everything else. So I guess that would be my closing words, Ben.
I love it. I love it. Well, Kyle, my friend, I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate your time pouring into everybody who's watching and listening. How, again, if you're going to give away, want a copy of your book, it was info@kylewilson.com. Is that correct?
Yes. And they can put Ben, or they can put book. And tell me a little bit about yourself too. If you're a Jim Rohn fan, I'll send you the Success Habits. This has 80 iconic thought leaders in it. I'll also send you some of these other books, the digital downloads, and some cool interviews with Darren Hardy and others, Les Brown. And yeah, if they're a Jim Rohn fan, tell me your story, or any of the people we talked about, or if you have questions, they can share that as well.
I love it. Going right back to the beginning, you said bring value, and you just offered it again to everybody watching. So Kyle, thank you for being with us today. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for those who listened. Thank you for being with us. And we will see you guys next week on Expert Interviews.
Ben, thanks so much.
Thank you.